Because of the incompetence of this Prime Minister and Liberal City Hall in Toronto, rent there has more than doubled over the last 9 years. What's worse is that the Prime Minister's so-called Housing Accelerator Fund has given $500 million to Toronto, and only months later, the politicians in that city hiked up home building taxes by 20%. Wow. Now 30% of all home building costs is government taxes alone. Why does the Prime Minister keep sending our money to build bureaucracies that block homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservative leader's hypocrisy on full display. Let's talk about their housing proposal, which the Conservative leader has been delaying debate on for months because he knows it's not ambitious enough. His proposal won't build homes fast enough, doesn't reach enough cities, and creates unnecessary bureaucracy. The Conservative leader would also rip up the 179 housing accelerator agreements and put the GST back on apartment construction. His clear lack of ambition on housing is partly how we ended up here in the first place.
Hear, hear.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay,
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was housing minister and we built 200,000 homes in 1 year, the rent was only $900 and mortgage payments were half of what they are today. Fast forward to present, the Prime Minister wants to has given $500 million to Toronto City Hall to jack up new taxes on home building. No wonder that when the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario, Richard Lyle, was asked whether the Prime Minister would keep his promise for 3.9 million new homes by the end of the decade, he said, and I quote, "No chance." Mr. Speaker, why doesn't he stop funding bureaucracy so that we can get out of the way and build homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It is shameful, again, that the Conservative leader continues to exploit the very real anxieties of Canadians. When the Conservative leader was housing minister, let's talk about his record. He withdrew the government from cooperative housing. He supported the construction of 0 new apartments, and he gutted affordable housing initiatives and created new bureaucracies. His housing proposal today continues to fall short. The Conservative leader is simply all slogans and no answers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My common sense plan to build the homes would reward municipalities that speed up permits and punish the politicians that get in the way. His approach has not only doubled housing costs, but he's built up Toronto City Hall with monstrous financial transfers so that they can block construction. Mr. Speaker, there have been 50 new tent encampments added in the City of Toronto in 6 weeks. Wow. There are 250 tent cities in Toronto alone. Is that his plan, to block homes and put up tents?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the so-called plan that the Conservative leader has put forward on housing does absolutely nothing to address homelessness or encampments. What we're actually investing in is hundreds of millions of dollars to help municipalities across the country build more housing rapidly, create the wraparound supports necessary to support people facing homelessness, and continue to be there on the most ambitious and comprehensive housing plan that this country has ever seen. This is part of what we're having to make up for the lost years in which he was housing minister 10 years ago, not creating housing for Canadians, not investing in our future.
Why does he sound like Dr. Evil when he says...
The Honourable Member for Baillieu-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, with regards to foreign interference, there was a report that talked of the elections of 2019 and 2021. It shows that there was a large deficit in coordination. It seems like the Prime Minister's office simply tried to sweep it under the rug. He admitted himself that he didn't read reports because he was not interested in them, which is not a good sign of leadership. How will the Prime Minister put an end to this complicity through inaction from his government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, of course, we thank the National agency for their diligent work. They put forward a number of recommendations upon which we are working. It is certain through our discussions on foreign interference, there were a number of challenges raised through matters such as internal communications through our intelligence agencies. We'll continue to implement recommendations and proposals that will improve the way that we respond as a government to foreign interference. The Honourable Member for Bélair-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, these aren't challenges. It's a monumental failure through ignorance and a lack of interest. To go even further in this direction, the Haut Commission has asked for information, but the Prime Minister's office literally withheld information and documents that the Commissioner had to fight to finally obtain. And it's the Commission that requested these documents. Will the Prime Minister promise his full collaboration and unconditional collaboration for this Commission from here on in? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as government, we shared with various investigative commissions more cabinet confidence than any government in the history of our country. We know how important it is to show Canadians that they can trust our public service structures in our intelligence bodies and in our government to counter foreign interference. And that is the reason for which we have shown ourselves to be transparent and open with the Commissioner, with all commissions. In fact, we will continue to show the work that we are doing as a government.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Okay, buddy.
The hospital in Moose Factory was built nearly 70 years ago. The wood roof is caving in. There are no elevators. Patients and staff deserve better. For 2 decades, the community of James Bay has been pushing the federal government to build a new hospital. The Liberals promised funding, but in the last budget, there wasn't a single cent for the hospital. The province and Winnebago Area Health Authority are ready to go. Will the Prime Minister finally fund the new James Bay Hospital, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past years, we have made historic investments in First Nations and Indigenous healthcare right across the country. We recognize there is more to do. We're going to continue to be there as partners to Indigenous communities, to provincial health authorities, to making sure those investments show up for vulnerable Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We know how much more there is to do on the path to reconciliation, but we are there to be a partner every step of the way, and we'll continue to work to respond to the important needs of First Nations communities around healthcare.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
His promise to the community and needs to build that hospital. Yeah. The transport collective.
Calm down there, Singh.
Public transit in Montreal is in crisis. Experts are clear. It's running out of money. And the longer this crisis lasts, the greater number of people will lose their public transit, and this government is doing absolutely nothing. The Liberals are abandoning Montrealers. What's the point of having Liberal MPs in Montreal if none of them are fighting for their city? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, rubbish. We have been here to invest in transit more than any previous government. And as a proud member from Montreal, our actions for the Blue Line, for the REM, our actions to continue investing in transit in Montreal, like is the case in Quebec City and throughout the country, will continue. We have implemented an infrastructure program to invest in a permanent and sustainable and recurrent way for decades to come in transit, and we'll continue to be here for Montreal, for Montrealers, for Quebecers and all Canadians when it comes to transit.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canada's housing crisis is only getting worse. The Liberals claim in Budget 2024 that they're going to build 3.87 million homes by 2031. And that would mean a new home completed every 57 seconds every day. At the Housing Committee, I asked Richard Lyle, a home building expert, if this was realistic, and he said, not a chance. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing. stop funding photo ops and start building the homes that Canadians desperately need.
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, with the recent housing plan, we've set out to build the number of homes that's actually required to solve the housing crisis. With respect, Mr. Speaker, it's disappointing in the extreme that the Conservatives won't even set a goal that will solve the problem. What's more interesting, Mr. Speaker, is the member who posed the question actually had her community benefit with a $31.5 million investment to build more homes in Kelowna. She's advocating that money is taken away from her city and be replaced by a program for which Kelowna is ineligible. Most MPs advocate for investments in their community. It's disappointing my colleagues doing the opposite.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was announced just this morning that, in fact, housing starts are down in my community and also across the country. Wow. And in 2015, people could actually afford a home. 9 years of this NDP Liberal government has only brought us a housing crisis. And the head of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario said that construction is down there, and we are seeing this across the entire country. He said high financing costs and development charges means home builders are sitting at home instead of building homes. So since this Prime Minister has no meaningful plan, will the Liberals vote for our housing bill put forward by the Conservative opposition leader to build the homes, not bureaucracy?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, if she argues that housing starts in her community are down, why is her solution to cut funding for housing in her community? It's endemic to the Conservative approach. When you actually look at the plan that they put forward, it includes a tax hike on new apartment construction. It includes cuts to the programs that fund affordable housing, cuts to the programs that fund cities to build housing, cuts to the programs that allow young people to get into the market for the first time. The cuts are so extreme, even Conservative premiers are crying out, threatening to call snap elections in order to avoid the prospect of Conservative cuts. Cuts will not build homes.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Tobic-Mactaquac.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are hungry and homeless. Yesterday it was confirmed at committee what Conservatives have been saying all along, that this housing minister will never meet his targets. In St. John, New Brunswick, the lack of housing options are leaving a family in a leaky, moldy apartment, and the father of 4, Corey Hamilton, is worried about the health and safety of his family. 10 new people a week are going homeless in Halifax in the minister's own backyard.
Crazy.
When will they stop funding photo ops and start building homes Canadians desperately need?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, even Conservative premiers recognize the damage these cost-cutting austerity Conservatives would wreak on our country. The only thing these Conservatives know how to do is cut, cut, cut.
That's right.
They want to cut the First Home Savings Account that has allowed more than 750,000 young Canadians to save up for their first home. Right. They want to cut support for infrastructure that is allowing municipalities to build homes. They want to tear Canada down, Mr. Speaker, but we won't let them.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Tobic-Mactaquac.
Canada as far
all
down
this
as it
current
can
federal
go.
Liberal government wants to do is blame, 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 and pass the buck. That non-answer will do absolutely nothing for the Hamilton family in St. John who are in desperate need of alternatives for housing. Since the Prime Minister has no plan and the Liberals have no chance tomorrow to build the homes, and all they're wanting to do is continue to build the bureaucracy, why don't they give all of their members a chance to vote freely on this leader's, Conservative leader's plan for housing? Let's do that tomorrow, a free vote.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Order. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, it is not only Conservative premiers who understand the terrible damage Conservative cuts would do to our country. Canada's mayors get it too.
That's right.
And that's why it was so shameful to hear the progressive mayors of 2 great Canadian cities, Toronto and Montreal, be vilified by the Conservative leader today. We believe in working with our municipal partners and our provincial ones. That's how we build Canada.